That's the basic example of listening skills, so that you know that. Gentlemen, let me ask you, you have some more information, and it's interesting. Why is it so important for us to listen?
It's not just important, it's absolutely critical.
Because guys just don't listen all that well.
My wife says that to me all the time. You never listen, at least I think that's what she said, something along those lines.
Something like that.
But it's been found in studies that we listen on a 25% efficiency rate. That's when we want to. I mean, we sit there and intently try to understand and hear what's being said. 25%. When we're arguing with someone, they find that we only listen on 10% efficiency rate. And we've all been there where you walk away after having an argument with someone, you think, geez, did I squeeze this in? Did I say that? It's almost like you want to turn around and scream it. Say, and another thing, because I'm not sure if I even said that before, but it's absolutely critical when we go into that room. In fact, I stop myself, and before I walk in, and I say to myself, I've got to listen like I've never listened before, because every word, as we saw with Scott Peterson, with Susan Smith, and every case, sooner or later, their words are going to betray them, and that's why we've got to be there to hear it and know that they made that mistake, and it's going to be that one slip that we're going to catch them on that we'll know they committed the crime.
When officers are out on the street, they get people who just start to talk, and they'll talk, and they talk, and they talk, and they talk, and it's a case of what we call verbal vomit. We need to let these people talk and just let all those words spew forth, because someplace in all those pieces of words is pieces of information, and all those words is a good piece of information. But if we're not listening, and if we're just saying, oh my goodness, here they go again, now what are we going to do? And most officers just have all kinds of other things running through their minds. They need to stop that. It's like Gary's saying, listen, because there's pieces of information.
Very good. Well, let's test your listening skills. Now I'm going to read the questions, and I want you to think about your answers, and then we'll talk about them, okay? Now, here's the first question. Do they have a 4th of July in England? Next question. How many animals of each species did Moses bring on board the ark? And last question. Some months have 31 days. How many have 28 days? Okay, well, let's talk about your answers. So here's the first question. Do they have a 4th of July in England? And the answer is?
Well, of course they do. Everybody has a 4th of July. Many people, when they see this question, they're thinking of the United States, especially when I'll take a graphic and I'll throw like fireworks in the background. And so they're thinking 4th of July in the United States. Right. Oh, no, that's an American,
Day,
right, an American holiday. Well, other countries don't have that. Well, in fact, everybody has it.
All around the world.
Everybody.
July 4th happens all around the world. Okay, next question. How many of each species did Moses bring on board the ark? And the answer is?
Well, this is an interesting question, because actually there's a couple of things on this question that I want to talk about. Oftentimes I get answers of 1 and 2, both of which, by the way, are wrong. And with 1, I wonder how they reproduce, but with 2, it's, well, not really, because the answer is 0. Moses had nothing to do with the ark.
Correct.
That was Noah. But I want to ask this question. How many people looked at this question? Because if they did, there's something else wrong. And not only do we have to listen, but we need to see, because if we look at the word ark, ark is misspelled. I wonder if anybody out there caught that today. So we need to listen and see.
I'll have to tell you the truth. I didn't. But anyway, let's move on to our third question. Some months have 31 days. How many have 28 days?
If you're a betting man, Stan, what do you think?
I would bet they all have 28 days.
That's a good answer. They all have 28. And many people think right away, well, okay, there's only, geez, you know, I can do my math, and I've only got so many days or months with 31, and they think of February with 28. Well, in actuality, every month has 28.
Absolutely. So what are people thinking or what aren't they thinking?
I think a lot of it relates back to, and as I'm listening and reading these questions, that when we take promotional exams, we're always taught, go with the first instinct. As soon as you recognize something, go with it, because if you give it any thought, if you think about it, you're going to be wrong. And I think a lot of people look at that and say, 4th of July, of course not, and that's what everyone says.
Why don't they have a second guess yourself?
Exactly. Okay. So let's go with the first response. That was my first instinct. Let's write down that answer. The same thing holds true when we're talking to someone. If we're looking at that person and saying, have those preconceived ideas that the person's guilty, we're looking for those responses, say, he's guilty. And what we really need to do is take our time and listen to what's being said. In fact, time is one of the few things that we do have on our side. Guilty people absolutely despise time. They hate when they give a response and you don't give them something back as if to say, okay, I understand, we'll move on. Instead of responding back right away, stare at them. Stare at them. They can't stand to have you look inside. It's almost like they get this claustrophobic thing inside of their head. It's like, man, they're looking inside, they can see. Just stare at them. You don't have to make a response. You don't have to nod your head. Just stare at them as if there's got to be more to that. And you will find that the guilty person will keep talking. They'll add a little bit more till the point where they finally get you to say, okay, I understand. Almost like, let's move on to the next question. So instead, use that to your advantage. Take your good old time. Listen to the response. Weigh it out inside of your head and measure it. Is that what a truthful person would have said? Look at the body language. Is that the thing that they would do, or they'd be leaning forward, convincing me, absolutely without a doubt kind of a thing?
Very good. All right, well, we have a short, we'll get back to you, Dave. Yes. We have a short video clip on evasive answers.
Did you do any of these things to Jenny?
I wouldn't do nothing like that.
Okay, what about this? Evasive answers.
Well, he never answered the question. I think I talked about that earlier. Definitely, you know, I wouldn't do nothing like that. Well, I want to hear yes or no. I don't want to hear something else. And that's what we're hearing here.
Absolutely. And the person that didn't commit that crime would come forth with an adamant, no, I didn't. That's what you or I would say. No, I didn't. As opposed to a person just comes back with, man, I wouldn't. And if you look at it like would not, could not, should not, ought not, is not as strong as denial as I didn't do something. Mm-hmm. And that's what he should have said, is I didn't do it, as opposed to I wouldn't do something like that.
Such as what we're seeing right now, denial versus objection.
Absolutely, and there's a big difference between the two. A person that didn't commit a crime says, I didn't steal, I didn't rob, I didn't rape, as opposed to the person that's perhaps guilty of that crime, and they say, man, I wouldn't do something like that. I'm not that kind of a person, or, you know, how could I possibly have sex with her? Well, we don't see it as sex. We see it as the perverted, the heinous crime that it is. But a person that's receiving some kind of sexual pleasure, they see it as sex as opposed to the crime of actual rape.
So it's an answer with a question almost.
Exactly. That's what we call an interrogatory. When you ask a question, the person answers a question to the question that you asked, that's inappropriate. It's improper. A truthful person wouldn't do that.
Okay.
What they're doing is planting an idea in your mind. And what that idea is...
To the interview, you mean?
Right. When they give that type of an answer, what happens in most of our minds is the way we think is, well, how could a person do that? And so then where many officers fail is they start to justify that person's answer, and that's where we need those people to stop. Anytime I hear something like that where a person's given me an answer that says, well, you know, right, how could a person do something like that? I need to stop, because I'm justifying that person's existence, that person's story, and I need to go back and say, wait a minute, what's really being said here? And that's what's important.
When you ask a person the bipolar questions we talked about before, where you're looking for that yes or no response, you get anything other than a yes or no response. It's a response, but it's not an answer. It's certainly not the answer that I'm looking for. As a result of that, we have what we call an antidote to that. Don't just look at that and say, I asked the guy if he committed the crime and he said he wouldn't do that, and say, the guy's a liar. Instead, the antidote is this. It's what we refer to as the three-strike rule. You ask it once, you ask it a second time, and you ask it a third time. You ask it 3 times back to back. And giving that person, the truthful person, the opportunity to tell me, no, I didn't do it. If after 3 times, and if we watch that video all the way through, you would see where he just absolutely could not say the word no. And if he did say the word no, it makes him an absolute liar. And if it makes him a liar, he goes to the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight that we talked about with all the body language. And on top of that, it makes him out to be a liar. There's something about being a liar that we as human beings absolutely do not like. So the softer way, or the way of buffering that no response, by simply saying, man, I wouldn't do that. But too often, police officers, interviewers, interrogators accept that as the guy said no. In fact, he didn't say no. A lot of times you'll hear the news media, they'll do exactly that. I asked so-and-so a question and he denied it. Well, maybe they're not exactly sure, they're not familiar with the term of denial and objection. So when you read their words, you have to wonder, did he really deny it, or